So let's get started. So beginner's guide, obviously full life cycle, I think is the key point here. And another key point, if you've recently joined some of our webinars, when we mean onboarding, we mean both sides of the equation. When you say both sides of the equation, what do you mean by that, Joe? We think of that as configuration and adoption. Those are two different initiatives that typically have to happen in onboarding. And so we're going to be unpacking that a little bit also. So it's not just getting somebody set up, it's obviously having the customer use it and start to see value and ROI, right? So we always want to make sure we don't lose that fact. A lot of times we feel like or see that people, when they talk about onboarding, they talk about turning it live. Turning it live to us means nothing. Turning it live is just halfway there. And so let's jump in. Okay. Just kind of clearing the deck there. So from sales handoff to ROI recognition, ironic, as if I knew what was coming. That's what kind of we're going to be walking through the whole journey here. Is literally from in many cases a sales handoff process, and I might even cheat a little bit here. We might even go back just a wee bit more because we do see some clientele. I don't want to give you the answer here. I'll come back to it. But ultimately, what we're trying to help out here is there are when you're thinking of the full life cycle of onboarding, um, independently, they're all obviously pieces, but when they're all interconnected and seamlessly working together, the overall value and impact to the customer dramatically increases. So you think of it like any kind of team sport, right? Like if you're a football fan, or whatever, and you have a great QB quarterback, but you have no lineman, it's going to be hard. Him or her is going to be sacked a lot, right? So it's a team effort. And so the overall value is when you really are establishing that end-to-end cycle, because each piece kind of builds off of each other. And in some cases you can combine them if you have a certain flow, but ultimately you don't want to ignore any of these pieces. And obviously that's why we call it kind of full cycle and building that trust with the customers, right? So the overall value here is very substantial, having that fully connected, because you can already tell by a couple of these bullet points, and these will be elaborated on. There's a lot of money on the line, clearly, when you're onboarding. There's a lot of retention on the line. There's a lot of cross-selling opportunities on the line. A lot of referrals on the line. So the numbers start to stack. And so as we go through these, do consider that every single one of these elements at some level should be being executed, hopefully at its maximus, to provide that fully connected experience and not leaving money on the table. All right. So this is really ultimately where the rubber hits the road for a lot of clients. So let's get started with, again, today is the full life cycle. So we're not going to be able to penetrate for 20 minutes on each topic. I'll kind of give my reasons why and elements around some of these and kind of critical points. So we are going to do obviously full life cycle implementation and onboarding, meaning people using it. This is just an upper class of classification. Each one of these also has lower levels: sales handoff, readiness scoring, onboarding, mutual plans. I could do seven literally meetings just on mutual plans. And there's two mutual plans for implementation and a mutual plan for adoption also. So don't forget about that. Then you get into onboarding, as I just mentioned, launch, and then post-launch, which is where you get into your mutual plans for adoption and scaling everything. I will argue in, oh, I actually don't know the stat, but I'm going a little gut here, so give the old man a shot here. But I would say in about 25% of our clientele, and a lot of the clientele we talk with too, um, the actual implementation team, not the adoption, but the implementation team is honestly joining before the sale is even done. What I mean by that is you'll find stuff on our site talking about the last 25% of the sale. If you have a pretty complex product, we see implementation onboarding people north of the contract. What I mean by that is they're getting involved before the contract is signed. You got to figure out when to pull them in, but to build that trust and relationship and to improve the sales handoff, we're seeing a lot of that going on. So just food for thought. Again, everybody's model is different. Everybody's resources available is different, but just something to think about if there is a lot of relationship on the line or history. So we see this a lot in like um, regulated industries. We have a lot of healthcare clients or fintech or finance, insurance, you name it, government sale, like just lots of things where maybe the sales process was extremely long. And so you've been involved to ensure that the handoff and to you as an implementer and the onboarding process and in general is going to be better, right? So just food to thought. So it actually could be part of your sales process. But ultimately, this is what we're going to go through. And then definitely some sub items on each of these. Again, any of this stuff, rip off and duplicate. If you are a repeat customer, you know I have to fit this slide in on every single webinar. It's yeah, it's like it's a must. And again, so why we're talking about full life cycle is this is the driver. Too many people, not in a bad way, silos everywhere. 7 to 10 people on your side, 7 to 10 people on the client side, then the actual users, right? So the actual beneficiaries of your platform, your service, whatever it is. A lot of people, a lot of cats, hurting them. Has to be a repeatable, scalable way so that you have visibility on everything that is going on. So you are basically forced to have to believe in a lot of these concepts because of the environmental factors to it and how you're being held accountable on not only your side, but then also trust and relationship on the client side. So the environment is the environment. As like with everything, you need to adapt. That's why you're here today, right? To make sure that you have access and visibility on all of these elements. So this is it's the symptom. This is the actual root of it. Having problems moving data back and forth, it's because of this, right? This is the root problem where a lot of challenges for organizations from communication, collaboration, data sharing, whatever it might be, all seem to foster in this environment because this is what you get into every single time. Okay, so root cause environment. So let's get into it. So sales handoff. So we talked about this. So this is prototypically an internal facing, obviously, activity that a lot of our clients are doing. And it depends on the quality of whether or not you have a good sales team, meaning are they documenting everything? Do you have access to all the resources, videos of the meetings? A lot depends. So these are things obviously to take into consideration, and getting everybody aligned. This is basically you working with them to make sure that there aren't any other major red dots or considerations. Also, as I identify initial risk and gaps in understanding, this is interesting. I'm going to kind of carry that through into another comment here, but also this is where you can start to share team dynamics. So backgrounds on the different individuals, archetypes, communication patterns. Do they like to be how they like to receive information, everything. This is where you should be really trying to tee up your team. Obviously, this is on the sales side a lot, but you can ask the right questions clearly to manage the right expectations. Now, some of the things that people have challenges in with this is that sales has promised things potentially that aren't as turnkeyable. Two, timing. They promise you could be live in a month, and maybe your product or service can't. So this is also to understand and identify any of those potential gap areas there so that when you do your kickoff call, um, it's a lot smoother because you kind of know maybe where potential pitfalls are lying, right? So here I'm just anecdotally kind of walking through it. Another kind of important thing, and I can't say this is a blanket statement for all of you who are here today, but we are seeing this a little bit more often because of the complexity of the purchasing process. Um, what I mean here is when I get to the next slide, which is clearly the kickoff call or the kickoff with the client, maybe not a call, meeting, or I'm getting at. We are seeing more and more on super complex environments, especially if it's been a top-down sell, that the actual kickoff call. Oh, maybe I didn't. Oh, what did I do? I might have messed up here in my slides. Huh. I thought I had one. What did I do? That's not readiness score. Huh. I'll get it here. Bear with. I don't know who made this deck. It was me. So with the sales handoff, right? This is obviously coming inbound. What we have found on the discovery call or the first step of the process, that there is a delta where the companies are actually still selling. And what I mean by that is the people who have been brought into the onboarding experience maybe weren't actively involved in the selling process. And so they have a ton of questions related to the product and service prior to really getting to the agenda of onboarding and getting it set up. And so we have seen that. And like I said, it's bubbling up more and more depending on the corporate structure and how the purchasing process was. And so the actual discovery call for many of our clients actually is almost partially a selling call again, where sales resources are needed to kind of facilitate through that. We can argue and debate whether that's good or bad. That's not the point here. But what we're seeing is there is some of that happening because of the new parties, and they're like, oh, is this product going to do this, this, and this? So some of our clientele are still bringing in the sales resources in the initial kickoff call process and alignment with the customers. Make sense, everybody? You would know if that's happening more on yours, but it's a it's a safer also way to transfer the relationship, obviously in the first stages too, where if the original sales leader or leaders, follow that deal a little bit more downstream, then that, obviously helps with the relationship handoff. But we are seeing that. So in your agenda for your initial kickoff call, in some cases, we call it reselling, and it's not really reselling, obviously. We're just saying it's restating the why, restating the purpose of your solution and the benefit to the team, helping educate a lot of new people who might not have been around the first time around. Make sense, team? Okay. I might have accidentally deleted a slide. So another thing that we do during it, when we get to the kickoff call, is assessing. So this is probably a new concept for many of you. And where this kind of derives from is organizations having atrocious time to values, TTV, time to value. I'm hoping if you aren't familiar with that metric, it's basically ensured. We have plenty of presentations on math around all that, but basically getting not just your client live time to value, which means they're adopting it and they're starting to see the return, right? So that's TTV, time to value. So what we have helped a lot of clients do is basically help them build readiness scores to onboard. And so what this means is a lot of times there's a sales function, and then right away everybody's like, let's get them live, right? Like for a lot of reasons, publicly traded, wanting to move cash. We get it, but also it can cause quite a bit of problem when the client isn't ready, meaning your net new customer really isn't ready for onboarding. So for a lot of our clients, we help them with kind of a preparedness scoring process. And a lot of that is educating, obviously, how much engineering do you need, if data requirements, just all sorts of things, and then scoring the client and making sense that, hey, you know what, maybe we should delay 3 weeks, and then we can have a very strong mutual plan and execution plan at that time. And so no resources are being leveraged. Your cost obviously is managed. Frustration also managed on the customer side, and all the way downstream. All right, makes sense. So it's obviously building rapport, but teeing people up for success more than sending them, hey, we need these 800 things and we know you're not going to get it to us in time, et cetera, et cetera. So it builds greater trust in the relationship. And I'm going to, this is kind of like a tool, let's call it, on that. We have another tool that is very, very successful in unlocking these things too. So, for instance, just like if they have no engineering of, I'm just making up like just obvious things. If they have no engineering available and you need engineering, you might want to wait and tee them up or phase your deployment a little bit differently, which means at first we're going to launch this, then we're going to launch B, C, or phase one, phase two, phase three, right? Makes sense. So think about that from a readiness score because that can really help protect the organization's TTV, but most importantly, cost. Like it's a very big, slick way of managing the costs. And also, I mean, let's be honest, there's a lot of emotion in an onboarding too, and this helps build additional trust because you're teeing the client up for success. Making sense, everybody? Okay. Um, Very successful tool in the toolbox. So here's the onboarding kickoff. Look, I didn't miss it. I was like, how could I miss that? So we do the readiness, right? And then you get into the kickoff. Obviously, here, all of you are seasoned professionals or you're learning the hustle. Obviously, this is where you're going to be implementing roles. We would argue, again, and I'll allude to it here later, you have two different internal roles. You have the implementation lead and you have the adoption lead on the new client side. Now, in many cases, you'll say it's the same exact person. Great. But you want to make sure that you're identifying those clear roles because those are your two quarterbacks or internal champions that you're going to be riding with to obviously get this to become very, very successful. And you're going to be equipping them with the tools to do that, like mutual plans, obviously, the readiness, and the next slide, which I will show you how that builds trust. There's an additional trust, and those are two people you need to build trust with. Of course, high level, you're going to be setting some expectations about the journey, phasing if you can. A lot of times we recommend phasing of your launch, especially if it's super complicated, because we want to have a win as early as possible. And sometimes that win is not even going live and having people adopting it. Sometimes it's initial fast configuration and then an executive demo, meaning demoing to the original folks who bought your product or service, but showing them how it's progressing, what it's going to look like, and what. So you have a celebration moment, excuse me, early in the relationship, creates momentum, creates opportunities, obviously also builds trust, but most importantly, your new client looks like a rock star to their boss or bosses. And so you get kind of the point. There's always the emotional side of this also, right? So you got your kickoff going there. Again, don't forget hashtag. I talked about potentially sales needs to be into this because if it's a whole new group of people, again, you might be re-educating some whys there. So again, in the process, you can see how we're getting to this onboarding kickoff. Ta-da, ding, ring the bell. Everybody's excited. Okay, goal setting then starts to kick in here. Um, we are from the school, and it historically has proven out astronomically awesome. We are mutual plan people. There'll be a slide here in a moment, but ultimately it's designing and defining success. And so we want to be capturing value points at this point in time. Very, very, if the client has benchmarks that they currently have been measuring against, and you want to take those and we're going to be able to demonstrate your value. So you sold them something, right? And so now it's reaffirming those goals and those measurables, right? So that we then can build the plan to get them live fast within reason, then adopting it so that they can start to see the ROI coming back. This part is frequently overlooked. There's a kickoff call, everybody sets dates, and they're on their way. But the idea here is to, again, try to identify quick wins, but then also true ways that you can show this customer in 3 to 6 months after it's been implemented and deployed and people are using it, that they're getting the value, the original benefits you want. So everybody's product is different. Obviously, yeah, everybody's different. So there's process to that. Actually, I'm doing a webinar. I don't know when it's going to be sometime in Q1 because I saw the team pass that across my desk that I was doing that one. But it will be kind of coaching you on how to inject those complicated, sometimes nervous questions into it. So it's a little bit more of a approach strategy to unearth some of these. So very, very important because obviously you want to be able to demonstrate to your client they bought your product or service for this. And look, we're already starting to do that. And that's why I stress their short term and long term, because you can't get them to whatever you originally, pitch them within 3 months to 6 months, right? ROI and some of these other metrics take much longer to get there, but you want to be able to prove we're trending in the right way. Make sense? Okay. Very important. We're very big on goals and accountability because it works. And I'm assuming that's why you're here today too, is you're trying to figure out ways each one of these pieces to the process really help. Like I've done a trillion, literally, things on mutual plans. You're probably familiar with the concept. We heavily leverage these mutual plans for, again, implementation, and then of course the adoption side of it. And it's joint, mutual. This is how you create them. You create them with your client. Your client doesn't know what they don't know, obvious. So you're the consultant, you're the expert, right? You're also going to establish trust by doing this, right? And so all of these things, they are tools to help achieve success, but they are also emotionally tied into building rapport, building trust, building relationship, and doing things together, which is the difference of successful clients, quite frankly, and not. Because if it feels like you're just telling them what to do and you're not considering them or vice versa, it becomes a lopsided relationship. It's like a marriage, right? And so in here, we're very, very big on jointly creating these action plans with great detail to obviously help move the implementation and adoption forward. So mutual plans, very, very big part of this process in general. Plenty of additional, and like I said, we can deep dive on those all day long. Okay, we kind of talked about this a little bit. I kind of jumped the shark, but it's kind of always part, excuse me, of this process, is creating that accountability and fostering collaboration between maybe not only you, but the client and maybe some additional vendors that might be involved in the process. But it's basically getting everybody on the same page of to track certain metrics so that the client likes what you're doing, you're proving your ROI, and obviously that's going to be cross-sell opportunity, right? So all of these things all are interconnected, and small steps in each one of the processes can get you there. Okay. So this also then leads to what a ton of our clients have successfully done is during the onboarding process, they're actually generating new revenue opportunities for the team. So what I mean by that is, again, if you've been following the recipe, we're having intimate conversations, unearthing problems and areas of opportunity for the client. Frequently, the client would have said smaller versions of this to your sales team member, but the sales team member potentially didn't have the opportunity to really unpack it in great detail. But as you're onboarding your clients and you establish that trust and obviously consultant rapport, you're going to start to identify a tremendous amount of areas of opportunity to expand your relationship with them. And this works extremely well by having a structured approach, because every conversation leads to what's the challenge they're facing, what problems are they, oh, by the way, we could do this. And they're also telling you how much it affects their business, because you're walking through how do we justify any of the expense for the current one, right? Helping them define ROI. Well, logically, that carries over into anything else you have found. So what we see frequently is that during this process, and obviously identifying cross-sell opportunities, if you have a celebration moment, like I was talking about earlier, that you can invite the executives in, already by that, before the first project is even, or first launch has happened, you're already getting people to think about, wow, we could use this for this and this also, which would help us, this much more. So you're getting positive momentum, trust and relationship, and executive buy-in that they selected the right vendor, right? So again, full life cycle, all the dots connect. It's very, very important, kind of driving that success, right? And it kind of fulfills itself as you just keep going through each one of these, elements. I alluded to this earlier, part of the mutualness of everything. We do a tremendous amount of these also and recommend these dramatically. So you would have had the readiness score, which is the client ready per se, obviously, right? Then when you get into the actual mutual plans and the actual deployment plans, we recommend pre-mortems. So pre-mortems are, again, I'm hoping somebody can predict what I'm about to say, but pre-mortems is a joint exercise with the internal champions, if you have one or two, whatever that is, internal implementation and adoption. If we were going to predict failure, where are we going to find some hiccups and areas of challenges? And you drop a hammer like that and you'd be amazed what you hear back. Simple question like that. And then if they don't engage, you just break it down by area of the deployment and adoption, and you'll start to get, we're concerned about training. Tiffany in accounting is going to be slow as hell, or Bobby in accounting is going to be slow as hell. I think you all know what I'm saying, right? It opens up an active dialogue. That active dialogue and results of that active dialogue goes into your mutual plans to ensure success. So you get your readinessing, and then you're also pre-mortem with the client, not post-mortem, too late. Crap has hit the fan. Don't like those. We like to solve the problem before. And so with the communication, trust, all the elements that we've been talking about, now you layer that on with a pre-mortem, and now your plans are even that much stronger. Confidence in delivery is going to be very high. Confidence in adoption is going to be pretty high, because there's a lot of devil in the details. We all know it's nobody's first rodeo here, right? It's asking the right questions to the folks that feel trusty, like they trust you, and then you're working together to identify all of these elements downstream. 2 or 3 things that come out of these things can dramatically affect the TTV and the happiness of a customer, just by actually communicating and doing this. Don't get me wrong, we are super, super for automations, other techno like AI, everything inside our onboarding experience. I'm all about it. Don't get me wrong. But when it's blended with great process and great, obviously, light, where everything is interconnected and available, this is where this is the difference between AA and AAA baseball and the league and the majors, right? Like it's exponentially more engaging, more valuable, more trusting with clients. And of course, they're going to launch successfully, ding, revenue. 2, you should be cross-selling them because you've unlocked more there also. So pre-mortem, okay, another very strong piece to the puzzle there. Onboarding and implementation, this I just kind of grouped together. This is obviously going to be a mutual plan and all your normal kind of activities of, data sharing, data configuration. Obviously, we're always trying to identify ways to make that repeatable, scalable, capture the data the right way. GIGO, garbage in, garbage out for a lot of clients or problems. But this is kind of the essence, the true mutual plan for implementation. These are just kind of things, based on that couple of sidebar things, of course. It's we do try to recommend some sort of piloting so you can go launch with a smaller team, get feedback, rinse, repeat, and then scale with a larger group. Some companies and services and products you can't do it. It's great if you can because again, it gives you a quick win. You can move faster to that with kind of a small team perspective. You name it. We would recommend that as much as possible if you can. Okay, so launch and deploy. So obviously implementation is successful, but no ROI yet. You're going to launch. Okay. So now you're going live or the service is going live. As I talked about, if you can phase. I already talked about creating those kudos earlier in the process so that the team is celebrating, right? Um, Kind of all your kind of standard things. Now we're getting to the actual adoption. So we call this Tiger Team post 120. Again, some of our clients, we look at it as Tiger Team post 120, which is where now your team plus the implementation of the client leader, now you're working with how do we actually roll out this to the actual users, right? Or beneficiaries of this. So again, that's why if possible, to do the phases because you can move much faster. Hopefully you recruit the right people to the team because they're willing to give you feedback, et cetera, et cetera. Allows you to do tweaks, optimizations, all sorts of stuff. Very, very, yeah, it's very, very effective strategy of gathering that quick feedback for quick adjustments and then getting it, to a certain point and then launching that out, obviously to other members of the team. Some folks it's 30, 60, or 90. We personally we're a 120 group like I have here. And we okay, there's a couple of different approaches you can do here, but we typically, if you're a SaaS company with a lot of configuration and stuff, we typically recommend you still have an engineer as part of this team, hence the Tiger team, an account manager, an engineer, somebody, product specialist, maybe not a full-blown engineer, but you know what I mean? So that if the client is experiencing challenges or adoption issues or things aren't connecting, correctly for them, that you can immediately resolve this problem. It's called FDE, forward deployed engineering, very popular with AI companies, very popular. Like we utilize that approach so that we're rapidly iterating with the client after launch to knock down any kind of challenges of adoption, data movements, whatever it might be, to really ensure success. And so this is a very critical part. This is the actual adoption side of any service or product that you might have. It's not just getting it live as we talked about. So very, very important. Again, lots of additional elements here, but that's critical as a step. And then getting to actual early ROI, right? So this goes back to the first step in the process or after sales handoff is basically reverting back to your desired outcomes. Like, why is the client utilizing your product or service? And this is when we got to get that ROI recognition or impact or whatever very clearly communicated to those stakeholders. At this point, people are using it. At this point, you're gathering continuous feedback and continuous refinement, but then also the rubber is hitting the road. The impact is actually happening to the client, which of course is that momentum of what we want for senior leadership, and of course continuation and cross-selling, right? So they all start just to layer on top of each other. And again, you got to capture the initial value at the beginning to achieve that, right? Like it's all fundamental. You can only do this if you did the right proper steps at the beginning. Optimization. This again kind of is a little bit not it should be for everybody, but I think you know what I mean. Some products and services are a little bit more attuned to this. We're continuous optimization, but and then like I've done, as we always say, if you're part of an onboarding team, you should never really not be onboarding the client. What I mean is you're just always selling them new services or expansions or new teams or whatever. So we always talk about continuous onboarding, that you never onboard a client once. You're onboarding them hopefully for years. And that's a great thing. And of course, in this use case, you're just repeating this entire mechanism over and over and over again for success. So continuous optimization, this is really where a lot of clients are expecting your benefit also, because too many companies that are software or SaaS or anything are kind of like, oh, we just sell you a license and you're on your own. The on your own is the problem. The client is really looking for somebody to help me maximize the tool I have to get the highest benefit possible. So this continuous optimization and relationship is actually the delta they're looking for and the guidance that they're desiring. It's also, if you're a company, it's not like they want it for free. They're willing to pay for that too. So it's an additional revenue stream for companies also. So it's a real win-win. And then of course you're there and you're always helping them to identify as net new revenue for your firm. Also, again, they're all layered on. Takeaways: couple of things. Obviously, trust the process. Trust the every detail matters across this journey map. Centralizing the data, centralizing these stories, centralizing all of this is critical. Hence, obviously mutual plans and all the other data storage stuff that, we do and help aligning the entire full cycle, because again, you're going to want to do it hopefully again and again. But for me and what we know is really the humdinger, Mayor Humdinger. If you're, I have a 3-year-old, so Mayor Humdinger from Paw Patrol. I always say Humdinger, and then I immediately think of this Mayor Humdinger. I digress. But the point being, um, each of those pieces, the elements of readiness, the elements of premortem, storing everything in agreed upon mutual plans and executing not only the implementation, but the feedback, then the actual, obviously, onboarding and actually adoption, right? Having a repeatable, scalable process for that allows you then to get better, have full visibility and resource management, literally cuts about 30% from your operational time because you have all of that going, but you have it in a way that is making the client as positive as possible because they're trusting the process, they're seeing the results that were desired. And when something goes wrong, because things will go wrong, they have the confidence and you have the credit built up to navigate maybe some things that do pop up that were outside of anybody's control. But again, since you have built that trust and relationship, you're in a good spot, right? And so I cannot express, it's not complicated. It really is not. But when executed, it's amazing. Um, with that said, obviously today was a 30,000 footer, but a lot of companies, as I do all these webinars talking about all these things, they ask me to kind of do a presentation to their team because they're wanting their team to kind of understand all of these areas and how they all interconnect so that their team can brainstorm and come up with how they could leverage these. And we do this for a lot of clients. I'll include this in the deck, but in order to do it, I just need a call with you, the leader, to understand what your goal is and maybe certain areas are more important to you or not. And once I understand that with you, I do these team. Most of the time they're virtual, depends where the clients are. But yeah, so it's a super high value. It's about a 1.5 hour presentation with your team to help you get your team on the same page with what your goals are, which I'm assuming your goals are pretty close to probably a lot of the stuff we're talking about here. That's why you're here. So highly valuable, all free. Really, really helps out. We've had great results for companies with that. So I'll make that offer out to everybody on the call today. That link will be in the presentation also. Again, Joey Connect, Senior Leader, Been at this hustle for a long time now, 25 years almost. Um, so all of the presentation stuff we went through, all of the sub elements of it, handoffs, all this stuff, mutual plans, all that jazz is all on our website. And I'll include a lot of those resources in my follow up. So again, appreciate everybody's time today. Yeah, look forward to helping any of you out solve some problems. Appreciate everybody. Have a great one. Thanks.